guys, it's Casey, and today we are going to wrap up the entirety of 2021. So 2021 is over, so we are going to look back at my reading throughout the year. We're going to talk a little bit about some stats and some information on like how my reading year went overall, and then I'm just going to go through it and we're going to talk about every single book I read in the whole year. So I track my reading on Goodreads, which gives you some stats at the end of the year, so I am going to partially use those. But I also started tracking my own reading in a spreadsheet this year. So this first portion is going to be the stats portion, and then the last portion is going to be quite literally a list of every single book I read, and then I'm going to have their star ratings that I gave them down in the corner. I read a total of 75 books this year, and 75 actually was my reading goal. I almost didn't meet it, and then I quickly slipped in a graphic novel at the end because we were at 74. But 75 was my reading goal, and I managed to hit it. I'm very happy with it. That is significantly less than last year. Last year in 2020, I read 115 books, and this year I only read 75. I was on pace to read a lot more this year, and then I kind of crashed at the end. So we'll see how this next year goes. My reading goal for this year is going to only be 55. I'm hoping to stick around that 75 mark, but I am concerned that if this semester goes like last semester did, I'm not going to be able to keep up. So overall, very happy with the number of books I read. The number of pages that I read overall, according to my spreadsheet, not Goodreads, is actually exactly 31,800, which is, again, significantly less than last year, but still a very respectable amount. And I think that shows that a lot of the books that I read tend to be a bit longer, which is also reflected in this stat from Goodreads that says my average book length is 427 pages. I think last year it was 430, so I'm still reading books that tend to be on the longer side. My average rating for the year, according to Goodreads, was 3.8. According to my specific analytics, it was 3.86. So overall, I'm happy about this as well. I think it's a little bit deflated from last year, which is good because I wanted to start being more critical, and I started reading a little bit more outside my comfort zone. I've started knocking off some of those like almost guaranteed 5 stars. So this is about where I want. I think a 3.5 rating is a solid one for me. Now we have this beautiful pie chart of genres that I've read. It's mostly fantasy. This is what I want. This breakdown of like about half fantasy and about 25% sci-fi is like exactly what I'm looking for. Fantasy is my favorite genre, immediately followed by sci-fi. And then things like contemporary, horror, nonfiction, all kind of mixed in. I would kind of prefer it to be fantasy, sci-fi, and then nonfiction. But I started reading some contemporary graphic novels this year that I think really bumped up those contemporary numbers, because for most of the year it was followed by nonfiction. I do want to try to read more nonfiction this year. The problem is like I'm reading so much for school, and I don't really ever count that in my goals because it's like articles, not books. And my brain can barely read more words on paper, much less more nonfiction words on paper. So we'll see how that goes, but nonfiction is something I do actually kind of miss reading. Next we have like the age range, the demographic that the books I was reading was targeted towards. It's overwhelmingly adult with a decent chunk of young adult, and this is kind of what I wanted. I wanted to trend towards reading more adult fantasy as opposed to YA fantasy. There's nothing wrong with YA fantasy. I still like it for what it is, but it's not really the kind of thing I like the most. Sometimes I'm in the mood for that like fast-paced, tends to be more angsty, easier to get through YA fantasy. Some of my favorites are YA fantasy, but it's just not been what I've been gravitating towards, so this graph makes a lot of sense to me. And I would like to kind of keep up this distribution going forward. The next thing I tracked was the format in which I read it. So was it a physical book? Was it an ebook? Was it an audiobook? And then was it a graphic novel? I don't totally know why I made graphic novel its own category, but I did. And here's the data. So I read about 65% of my books physically and just under 20% via audiobook, which is a distribution I'm pretty happy with. I like audiobooks. I do prefer to read things physically. I pretty much only read audiobooks for certain series or books that I'm not able to get a hold of, or if I for some reason think they're going to be better as an audiobook. This is also actually a decent chunk of graphic novels and manga, which is something I'm very excited about. I am really enjoying these and I would like to continue. And also I've recently gotten some ones that I'm very excited about, so that's good. There's like 1% ebook or something like that. I had to read one book as an ebook. I hate ebooks, I'm not gonna lie to you. Not at all. So this number being incredibly low, fine. It could be 0 next year. I really don't care. The last thing that I tracked that I think is like interesting enough to put in a video is the way that I acquired the book. So did I get it from a backlist TBR? So did I own it before the start of the year? Is it something I bought in the year of 2021? Did I borrow it from like a friend or something like that? Or did I get it from the library? And other than borrowing it from a friend, which is a small slice in there, I pretty much did a third of each. And I'm like pretty happy with this. I would like to transition a little bit more into my backlist TBR than my new TBR, but to be honest, I am working through a lot of my physical TBR. I have probably a consistent running of between 65 and 80 books on my physical TBR, and it stays pretty much within that level. So I'm reading a consistent amount from books that I already own, which is good. I should probably bring down that new books number because I should probably be buying fewer books and I should be reading the ones that I already have instead. But overall, this like 1/3 of each is something that I'm pretty happy with. So I think that's all of the stats that I'm going to talk about for this book, and I guess that kind of was like a brief goals discussion for the next year. I don't really know. So next, we are going to get into every book that I read in 2021. Let's go. Can we talk about how I started listing all of the books I've read this year? I got all the way through April before I realized that I wasn't recording. So we're gonna start off with January, and I'm just gonna go through every book I've read, and the rating will be in the corner. So to start off 2021, I read The Wicked and the Divine by Gillian McKelvey and Wilson Cowles. Next, I read Bossy Pants by Tina Fey, Cold Days by Jim Butcher, The Mad Ship by Robin Hobb, The Wicked and the Divine Volume 2, Uprooted by Naomi Novik, Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Ames, Artificial Condition by Martha Wells, and If Beale Street Could Talk by James Baldwin. So then moving into February, I read Vicious by V.E. Schwab, The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, A Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee, When the Bough Breaks by Jonathan Kellerman, Skin Game by Jim Butcher, The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch, and Ship of Destiny by Robin Hobb. Moving on to March, I started with Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey. Then I read Peace Talks by Jim Butcher, The Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty, Shout by Lori Halls Anderson, A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas, and Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. Moving on to April, we started with Battlegrounds by Jim Butcher, followed by Jade City by Fonda Lee, then Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson, Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, and The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Moving on to May, I read Coraline by Neil Gaiman, The Willful Princess and the Piebald Prince by Robin Hobb, Rogue Protocol by Martha Wells, Radio Silence by Alice Oseman, Cinder by Marissa Meyer, and Bloody Rose by Nicholas Ames. Moving on to June, I read Persepolis Volume 2 by Marjane Satrapi, House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski, Days of Blood and Starlight by Lainey Taylor, Gods of Jade and Shadow by Sylvia Moreno Garcia, Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, The Three-Body Problem by Shin Liu, The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green, Rat Queens Volume 1 by Curtis Wybe and Rock Upchurch. Then in July, I read Bloodchild and Other Stories by Octavia E. Butler, The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, The Prince and the Dressmaker by Jen Wang, Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, My Lesbian Experience with Loneliest by Nagata Kabi, Scarlet by Marissa Meyer, Edgar Huntley or Memoirs of a Sleepwalker by Charles Brockton Brown, and Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. Moving on to August, I read The Disasters by M.K. England, I Am the Messenger by Marcus Zuzak, Fool's Errand by Robin Hobb, Rat Queens Volume 2, Exit Strategy by Martha Wells, Descender Volume 1 by Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen, Crest by Marissa Meyer, The Golden Fool by Robin Hobb, Space Opera by Catherine M. Valenti, Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson, Princess Jellyfish Volume 1 by Akiko Higashimura, World War Z and Oral History of the Zombie War by Max Brooks, Princess Jellyfish Volumes 2 and 3 by Akiko Higashimura, Jade Warp by Fonda Lee, and Malice by John Gwynne. Then in September, I read A Close and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers, Bunny by Mona Awad, Caliban's War by James S.A. Corey, Red Rising by Pierce Brown, and The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. Then in October, I read Princess Jellyfish Volume 4 by Akiko Higashimura, and that's it. In November, I read nothing. And then finishing out the year in December, I read Traitor's Blade by Sebastian D. Castell, Fool's Fate by Robin Hobb, Artemis by Andy Weir, and My Hero Academia Volume 2 by Kohei Horikoshi. And that's it, unless I missed some, which I will never find out. That is all of the books I read in 2021, all 75 of them. Clearly the amount I read in each month was a little bit sporadic, but overall I'm really proud of myself and I feel like I had a great reading year. If you want to see my in-depth thoughts on any of those, I think I had the appropriate wrap-up linked in the cards as they came up, but overall I'm really pleased with myself and I hope this year goes as well as last year did. How did you guys do on your goals? Please let me know if you guys met your goals or what your goals are for the coming year, but I think that's all I've got for you guys today. If you want to keep up with what I'm reading, I have a link to my Goodreads down in the description below, but other than that, I will see you guys next time.